Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a spoiler-free review for Sherwood by Megan Spooner. Sherwood is a young adult retelling of the classic Robin Hood, and it is a gender-bent retelling, meaning that Robin Hood in the original story was male, but in Sherwood, Robin Hood is a female. I have never read the original Robin Hood story before or any of the variations, so I really had nothing to compare it to other than what I have seen in movies and kind of culture over the years, so I don't really know how accurate this story is to the original, just to keep that in mind. What I found interesting in Sherwood is that we have Robin of Locksley, who was the noble who owned lands and was really good to the people and was known as just like an upstanding guy. But in this book, Robin was never Robin Hood. So when I first went into the story, I was like, oh, Robin was Robin Hood and something happened to him and Marian took over. No, that's not the case. There was never a Robin Hood until Lady Marian kind of took up that mantle and gave herself that personality. So at the beginning of the book, we learned that Robin of Locksley has died. He went off to fight the Crusades for the king and he died. But the things that were going on before he left, such as the really high taxes on the poor and people being left on the street because they can't afford the taxes, is still going on. So Marian, thinking that Robin, if he were alive and there, would be able to help, decides to steal his cloak, take his things, and masquerade as this vigilante helping these people. And people see Robin's cloak and think that he is a ghost of Robin, that he's come back from the dead. And then Marian kind of just falls into the role of this savior for the people. Early on in the book, she does meet up with Will Scarlet, who is one of Robin's men, as well as Little John, and also a character named Alan, who I don't know if Alan was in the original story. I can't remember. So Robin Hood does have his band of merry men. Early on, Marian decides it's for the best to not reveal her identity to Will, Alan, and Little John, so they never actually know who Robin Hood is. They know it's not their friend Robin because he actually is dead. And they kind of just go with it because they see that this new Robin Hood is really trying to correct injustices. Our main antagonist is actually Sir Guy in this story instead of the sheriff. Yes, the sheriff is an overarching figure, but Robin Hood doesn't really have a lot of interactions with him. She has interactions with Sir Guy. So Sir Guy is the sheriff's kind of like adopted brother, but there's really no love or respect between them. Sir Guy just wants to follow the law. He doesn't ever question if the laws are just or not. And he is definitely Robin Hood's antagonist. But then we have Sir Guy and Lady Marian's relationship dynamic. Sir Guy definitely likes Marian and he even proposes to her. Marian cannot stand him at first. She just thinks he's dreadful and is not someone who cares about the little people. He's only doing the things that the sheriff tells him to, even though they're not right. So she really doesn't have a lot of respect for Sir Guy. But as the story goes on, we do see that their relationship changes and develops in a really interesting manner. So now I'm going to talk about the characters. So Marian, I felt like, had a very slow but deliberate development throughout the book, because when she first learns that Robin dies, she goes obviously through this grieving process and she has to kind of figure out what to do with her life now because she is a young woman in this time period. She's expected to get married, that kind of thing. But Marian's someone who doesn't really adhere to social norms at that time period. She likes to ride horses and go in the forest and shoot bows and arrows. And she always describes herself as being like taller than most men and not very graceful and kind of doesn't fit the mold of a noble woman during that time period. I felt like Marian was a very realistic character because she is constantly questioning her actions, her decisions. She really has to make a lot of tough decisions and she really does weigh the consequences and if her actions are the right actions to do and who and what they will affect. Over the course of the book, Marian does change a lot. So she has her noblewoman persona, and then she has her Robin Hood persona, where she really feels like she can be herself. She gains confidence in herself over time and is able to take on the role of Robin Hood, accept that as part of her identity, and be proud of it. The next main character was definitely Sir Guy, and I didn't have a problem with Sir Guy. He's definitely not very likable at first because he's very like stern and stoic and really doesn't have a lot of like humor, doesn't smile a lot, and we learn about his backstory. And once you learn his backstory, you do feel sorry for him and start to empathize with them. You know, he grew up in a not really loving environment. He was a prisoner of war kind of and had been tortured. He was all scarred on his face. So once you learn these things about him, you kind of can't help but feel a little sorry for him. And you can really tell that he is just trying to follow the law. But once Marion kind of helps him see that just because something is a law doesn't mean it's right, then he starts to change. And I really enjoyed their dynamic, how they grew to tolerate one another and even like one another, and how they kind of changed each other by learning to see from each other's perspectives. I know a lot of people did not like Sir Guy, and he is a romantic interest in this book. Like I said, he proposes to Marion, and he does like her and wants her to be his wife. And I read some reviews where people were just like, that is not what I was looking for in this book. I thought it was a good representation of enemies to lovers romance and how your first initial impressions of people aren't always accurate. Then we had our side characters who were fairly flat. So we had Alan, Will Scarlet, and Sir John, and there's really not much to say about them. They're just Robin's merry band of men. And then we had Elena, who is Lady Marion's like servant, maidservant, and she I felt like had a decent part because she was kind of doing what Marion did. She would dress up with like a boy and go into the forest and kind of feed Will, who was her brother, it's Will Scarlet's sister, information about what's going on with the sheriff and things like that. So she was kind of an informant. So she had an interesting role, and I felt like her relationship with Marion was very sisterly and very loving and very kind, and it was just a nice relationship aspect for the book. Now I'm going to talk about the things that I liked and didn't like. So some of the things that I liked was that this was a hero origin story. When I was thinking back on this, I don't think I've read any hero origin stories. I've read villain origin stories, but this was a hero origin story, and I really, really liked it to learn how Robin Hood became Robin Hood. What were the circumstances that prompted Lady Marion to become a vigilante, especially with the whole gender bent thing and Robin Hood not being Robin of Locksley, but being a noblewoman. So it was just a very, very cool spin on an original tale. And then we have the enemies to lovers romance, like I mentioned just a couple seconds ago. I thought that the romance was not overly done in the book. So the book is not a romance. It is a small, small part of the book, but I felt like she incorporated it just enough to make it interesting and make it feasible, because how the book ended, you definitely see how Sir Guy is important to Lady Marion's new identity and the new life that she's chosen. And I feel like if we didn't have him, especially in his relationship to the sheriff, then that might have made less sense. But just the role that he played in, Nottingham, and his relationship with Marion and his decision at the end just really, really tied up everything nice and neat. And then we have Megan Spooner's prose. She has lovely prose. And when I was reading Hunted, which is one of my favorite books, I just remember loving her prose so, so much. And in this book, it is exactly the same. It's very rich. There's so much description, but it's not overly done. Her word choice is just absolutely perfect. She's got beautiful writing. That's all I can say. And then the last thing I really liked, or I really appreciated, is that one of the main themes of this book is, surrounds feminism, not conforming to gender stereotypes. And I usually don't gravitate towards books that are like overly feminist. I don't like when it's shoved down my throat. And I felt like this theme of feminism was introduced to the reader. It was interwoven into the plot, but it was very subtle and very well done. Now I'm going to talk about the things that I didn't like. So the first thing is that this book is fairly slow. It took me to probably the halfway point before I really, really was invested. And the first half of the book is a lot of slow development for Marion before she kind of like takes the bull by the horns and makes her decision. So it is a slow book. But so was Hunted, and I still loved it. I think that is just Megan Spooner's way that she writes. She's a very slow burn author with regards to her plot. And then the second thing, and I might be just kind of nitpicking, but Marion was masquerading as a male, and she describes herself as being taller than Robin. She's not graceful like a woman, but like, I just find it really hard to believe that a woman could masquerade as a full-grown man. Like a boy, maybe. But like, I don't care what I do, I could never pass off as a male. Like, I just couldn't. Like, my voice would give me away. So I don't care how deep I try to make my voice, like, it's just not going to happen. So whenever you have stories where, a male's dressing up as a female, passing for a female, especially back then when they didn't have cosmetics or surgery or anything like that, like, I just find it really, really hard to believe that Marion was like believable as a male. Like, I feel like her voice would have given her away. I don't know. So that was tough for me to swallow. All in all, I really enjoyed Sherwood. I thought it was a very solid, strong, good book. But for some reason, there was just something about this book that I did not connect with. Nothing absolutely gripped me. I don't know if I just couldn't relate to the theme, I just couldn't relate to the character and what she was going through. There was just something about this book that I found missing. And if someone were to ask me, oh, is Sherwood a good book? Like, I have to say yes. The plot was good, the characters were great, the setting was great, the themes were good, the prose is beautiful. Like, it's a good book. But for me personally, I just didn't connect with it as much as I was hoping. And I ended up giving this book a 3.5 stars. Okay, you guys, let me know in the comments if you have read this book and what you thought of it, or if you've read any other of Megan Spooner's books and what you thought of them, and I will see y'all soon in another video. Goodbye.